Hello, I'm Linor Moudou. Welcome to Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in East Africa, where Kenyan President William Ruto on Friday is proposing spending cuts and additional borrowing in roughly equal measure to fill a nearly $2.7 billion budget shortfall caused by his withdrawal of planned tax hikes in the face of nationwide protests. Ruto scrapped the finance bill containing the tax increases in response to mass youth-led demonstrations that created the biggest crisis of his nearly two-year-old presidency. The protests, which started as an online outpouring of anger over nearly $2.7 billion of tax increases in a proposed finance bill, grew into a nationwide movement against corruption and misgovernance. At least 39 people were killed in clashes with the police, and some demonstrators briefly stormed Parliament last week. In a televised address, he says he will ask Parliament for spending cuts totaling $1.39 billion for the fiscal year that began this month, and that the government would increase borrowing by about $1.32 billion.
The number of advisors in government shall be reduced by 50% within the public service with immediate effect. Budget lines providing for the operations of the Office of the First Lady, the spouse of the Deputy President, and the Prime Cabinet Secretary will be removed. Public servants who attain the retirement age of 60 shall be required to immediately proceed on retirement with no extensions to their tenure of service whatsoever. The purchase of new motor vehicles by the government is suspended for 12 months, except for security agencies, while a new policy on transport for public officers will be developed. All non-essential travel by state and public officers is hereby suspended.
President Ruto also announced the slashing of the government's advisory staff by half and dissolving 47 state corporations. Overlapping functions will be dissolved. Following the address, Ruto hosted a live audio forum on the social media platform X meant to engage with young people. He faced a sharp questioning about policy, brutality, corruption, and economic policy. Now, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation's latest report, Financing Africa, Where's the Money?, provides a comprehensive analysis of both the financial needs deemed necessary for Africa to meet its development and climate goals and the resources that are currently available. It highlights Africa's substantial yet incoherent financial requirements, stressing the importance of balancing climate and development finance. While official development assistance constitutes 10% of Africa's financial resources, it often comes with restrictive conditions. The report underscores the potential of Africa's domestic resources, which could cover 75 to 90% of financial needs, with $100 billion lost annually to illicit financial flows. Joining us live in the studio for some analysis on Africa's financing challenges and what can be done is Abdul Bello, Executive Director of the World Bank Group for the Africa Group 2. Mr. Bello, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Interesting findings that we read in the report. So the report's main conclusion is that financial resources are available, but they are not optimally used, and recommends drastic reforms of the international financing system, including updating debt restructuring mechanism, African risk assessment models, and aid conditionalities. I mean, all of these are very interesting terms. Can you elaborate on this and precisely what is needed?
I want to appreciate really the quality of this report led by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. A couple of elements really we need to look at. currently, we are really at a juncture regarding financing for development. When we look at the African context, huge demographic growth, the youngest population in the world. By 2030, the Africa youth will represent 40% of the global youth. So there is an important pressure to address financing for development on the continent. But to do that, of course, we need also the international financing system to be at the level of those ambitions. Therefore, in the reforms we have been talking about, not only from the report from Mo Ibrahim Foundation, but the reform even we have been conducting at the World Bank, actually, what we are looking at is, I would say, a triptych, three-dimension: speed, scale, and impact. So we need to make sure that the available resources are accessible on time for the countries. So we need to look at how the MDBs, the development banks, the partners, are very diligent in processing those resources. This is one. The scale is, we don't longer want to have spread small amounts here and here. We need to look at how to make the economic transformation on the African economies. And then, of course, the impact, the longer term response, and I will say even the sustainable response. But to do that, of course, you need also, looking on the African perspective, more representation in the global financing architecture. Because in most cases, those decisions are made with Africans sometimes being in the room, but less vocal or less heard.
Mm-hmm. So illicit financial capital is one of the issues that has been highlighted. And the report says it proposes to stem the flow of IFC, which could increase resources by $1 billion. And this amount is even greater than the official development assistance, which is about $81 billion. So how can we combat capital flight? And is it through prior investment in specific areas?
Well, we need to look at it, of course, in different dimensions. Of course, investment, looking at what are the sectors where you need to have the most important growth that are driving also the rest of the economies, such as the energy, where we believe that there is an important opportunity really to bring more private capital. But to do that as well, you need also to conduct the necessary reform, the regulatory environment to be looked at, how to bring the IPPs, and how to develop also the connectivity in the country for better access to for the population. In Africa, you have 600 million persons who do not have access to electricity today. It's 2 times the population of a country like the United States. This is the amplitude. So to come back to my initial point, that's why we're saying the speed, the scale, and the impact is fundamental. But also, what kind of financing instrument we need to develop to address those specific needs.
Now, one of the issue here that critics argue is the fact that the World Bank's mechanism does not provide enough leverage to help African countries reduce debt. What is your reaction, and how does the World Bank support African nations in restructuring their debt and improving risk assessment?
Well, I will beg to differ on the role of the World Bank not supporting the African Council, or not enough. Okay. I will say that the bank has been there since inception, independence of the countries, in providing the capacities that are needed when it comes to access to resources. It started by providing what we call cheap financing, which we call concessional resources. In most of our developing countries, they benefit from those kind of instruments. This is one. Second, in terms of restructuring, exactly as you said, well, the bank has been working also with the IMF, for instance, in the context of the G20 Common Framework to help debt restructuring for some of the African countries, and we've seen the positive outcome on that. And the last point I will mention here is under the financing mechanism we have for the least developed countries, which is called IDA. Actually, there are some specific instruments that are meant really to help the countries do debt restructuring, credit rating, creditors outreach, okay, but also supporting, I would say, the governance and the capacity building in the finance ministry in the ways they negotiate also the future credit going forward.
And climate action in Africa is gaining momentum. The report recommends ensuring that financing climate goals does not come at the expense of development goals, yes, and forcing African countries to choose between development and the preservation of the planet. In your view, what can be done to reconcile this?
Well, what we are looking at, and this is something also coming from the report from Mo Ibrahim, but also reform we have been conducting at the World Bank. What we have been saying as an African constituency, the point is not about climate versus development.
Okay.
And it's not development versus climate. So the two has to come together. We see the impact of climate on the sustainable development today. Therefore, what we are saying, we need right balance on climate and development, but financing also on both the mitigation and adaptation side for African countries. Hence the importance, once again, of additional resources to combat that front, because sustainable climate means also sustainable development going forward.
The message is clear. Mr. Bello, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Abdul Salam Bello is Executive Director of the World Bank Group for Africa, for the Africa Group 2. Now, after fleeing conflict in Somalia, Mohamed Nathan overcame many challenges growing up in Kenya's Dadaab refugee camp today. He's helping young refugees learn digital skills that could lead to a brighter future. VOA's Ahmed Hussein met Matan in the Dagahali section of Dadaab and has this story.
Here in Dagahali refugee camp in northeastern Kenya, 30-year-old Mohamed Matan is teaching young refugees digital skills and hopes that those skills can lead to better opportunities.
We teach both basic and advanced computer program and other skills like freelancing, data entry, web development and web design to help refugee youth access online jobs.
Web development, web design,
Matan's parents fled Somalia in 2001 when he was 7 years old. Matan initially started doing manual work, but later he enrolled in a UN-supported digital skills training program in the camps. Now, Matan hopes the skills he's teaching will help young refugees stay out of trouble.
I started this initiative to help youth in the refugee camps avoid drug abuse and other activities that will compromise safety and security. Once a refugee is unemployed, they tend to engage in harmful activities, so we decided to empower them.
Students are able to attend different classes during the week, while some opt for weekend sessions. Abdurrahman Hassan is one of the trainees and says the program has benefited him.
We have learned digital skills like freelancing online, software and other computer skills that will enable me to access opportunities online and earn a living. We have benefited a lot.
Matan currently offers free classes to over 70 students in the refugee camp and aims to expand the program. However, he says there are some difficulties and needs assistance.
Some of the challenges we face are using old computers and the internet is slow. But if we get support, we hope to expand and improve the machines to keep up with the changing digital technology.
Kenya is home to nearly 800,000 refugees and asylum seekers primarily from Somalia and South Sudan, according to the United Nations. Trained refugees such as Mohamed Matan are optimistic that the skills they have gained here will pave the way for greater opportunities ahead. Ahmed Hussein for VOA News, Dadaab Refugee Camp, Kenya.
The junta leaders in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger are set to hold their first ever joint summit of the so-called Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in Niger's capital, Niamey, this weekend. The announcement of the summit was made on public radio in Niger. The meeting of the three military rulers is being held on the eve of a summit of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, 6 months after the Sahel states announced their withdrawal from the major regional bloc, which they claim is under French influence. Joining us in the studio for more is Timothée Donagmai, Chief of VOA's French to Africa Service. Timothée, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lenore, for having me.
So what are the primary objectives of the first summit from the Alliance of Sahel States?
Now, as you pointed out, this is the very first summit, an extraordinary summit. And one of the main decisions that are expected from this summit is the adoption of a text that was drafted in May, creating a confederation of the three countries So it will be interesting to see which of their sovereign powers they're going to relinquish in favor of this new entity.
That's interesting. The meeting will be held on the eve of the ECOWAS meeting. Is this a message there that they're sending?
Absolutely. It's a way for them to show that they are really moving away from the regional organizations. They are trying to do their own thing, and that they don't want to have anything to do with ECOWAS.
Remind us some of the main points of contention between these three countries and ECOWAS.
Well, the main point of contention is that these three countries have been facing jihadi violence for a number of years, but they say that ECOWAS has not really helped them to fight the jihadis. And the other point is that they feel ECOWAS is too much under French influence, and they believe that for them to develop, they have to move away from France, and that's why they kicked out the French troops from these three countries.
Yeah, that's clear there. And then the hostility towards French, how has it influenced their foreign policy and also international relations?
Well, it has really influenced their foreign policy. Now they are opening up to countries like Russia, like China, even Turkey. So they really feel that they have to move away from French influence, and that has had an impact, a big impact on their foreign policy. And
one major news to look forward to after this summit?
Well, one major, as I said, we are looking forward to see what kind of which of their powers they're going to relinquish to the new confederation.
Okay, Timothy, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Timothy Denagmaye is Chief of VOA's French to Africa Service. Now, with 4 months remaining until the U.S. presidential election, political divisions among the electorate are stark. Some voters are blaming the media for dispensing the sense of separation. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more.
U.S. voters say there's no question that the United States is polarized ahead of the November presidential election.
I think this is the most divided we've seen the country since probably the civil rights era. I mean, we've got people who can't even have a conversation.
Recording engineer Michael McDermott believes politically polarized media contribute to the problem.
You just have separate news stations for separate viewpoints. You have to kind of take everything you hear with a grain of salt.
A 2023 survey found Americans are more likely to see the news media as hurting democracy and increasing political divisions than decreasing them. Only 16% said they were very confident that the news media reports the news fully, accurately, and fairly.
When you read the news, like, you can just tell, or like the people that are giving it to you, you can just tell by like the wording that they use that they're trying to get you to think like one way or the other.
Media driving polarization isn't an accident, says Justin Owen, president of the Beacon Center of Tennessee, a free market public policy organization.
It's clicks, right? It's, eyeballs on your news stories and those types of things. And there is an incentive, frankly, to be more extreme in the positions that you put out there, because that's going to get more attention.
Many also blame social media for widening the political divides.
People spout their opinions there too. I think it fans the flames.
But while traditional and social media may stir divisions, experts say they don't cause them.
There's very little evidence that media ever persuade people from their deeply held beliefs. Polarization, was happening before all the media change and before partisan news made a resurgence.
As the presidential election draws near, Dunaway says she's far more concerned about the spread of misinformation and the increasing challenges that average news consumers face to discern truth from fiction. Veronica Balderas Iglesias, Falls Church, Virginia.
We are excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a naturalized Ghanaian citizen makes a major contribution to the country's music industry. We'll be right back.
As journalists continue to report on complex and difficult topics, including conflict, natural disasters, and human suffering, studies like the one done by the Harvard Kennedy School indicate it's increasingly exposing them to trauma and affecting their mental health. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will explore how mental health is discussed in the media and why female journalists are at a higher risk. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, a report from the UN Refugee and Migration Agencies and the Mixed Migration Center Research Group estimates the land routes in Africa are twice as deadly as the sea lanes across the Mediterranean Sea. Roaming criminal gangs subject them to enslavement, organ removal, rape, kidnapping for ransom, and other abuses. A Congolese civil society group says a militia attack on a coal mine in northeastern Congo, gold mine that is, has killed 6 Chinese miners and 2 Congolese soldiers. The attack targeted the village of Gambala and the nearby Camp Blanquette gold mine in the Ituri province, according to Jean-Robert Basiloko, a member of a local civil society group. And scientists in South Africa are stunned to discover that termite mounds that are still inhabited in an arid region of the country are 34,000 years old, meaning they are the oldest known active termite hills. The mounds existed while saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths roamed other parts of the earth, and large swaths of Europe and Asia were covered in ice. Since the end of colonialism in Africa, many foreigners have visited the continent and made the leap to settle there permanently. They have built a new life and embraced the African spirit. One of such individuals is the British-born guitarist John Collins. After briefly visiting Ghana as a child with his father, he moved back years later. He is now a naturalized citizen who contributes to the country's music industry as a musician, journalist, and researcher. VOA's Isaac Kalezi met him in Accra.
I came to Ghana as a child, not with any purpose, but then I came back to Ghana in 1969 to be with my dad, because my parents, my mum and dad had divorced, so I wanted to be with my father. I was about 23. And I took a course in archaeology and sociology and political science at Legon. So I'm a Legonite. When I came back in 1969, as I said, I was about 23, and I was already a musician in Britain. I'd been playing rock guitar, jazz guitar, blues guitar.
John Collins is among a few international diasporans who moved and settled permanently in Ghana, naturalized, and gone on to make significant contributions to the country's history. He is a well-known figure in Ghana and West Africa, mainly for his work on popular and new traditional music, including highlife and Afrobeats.
I joined so many different bands, I formed so many bands. I went to Nigeria, I played with people like Victor Owaifu, and worked a lot with Fela Kuti, Anikulapo Kuti in Nigeria, worked with bands in Ghana, went on TV, I did so many things, but it was all a labor of love.
John Collins has also worked as a music journalist, writer and historian. His academic publications on African popular and neo-traditional music are used in universities all over the world. But he says living in Ghana was not all that smooth for him.
Well, it's very tough, of course. I mean, I never in Britain experienced things like coups and curfews, shortages and so on, dumso, all of these things. But luckily, just my character is such that I'm not too much of a materialist. If I was looking for a very comfortable material life, I don't think I would have settled in Ghana, because things are tough here.
Here at the music department of the University of Ghana, Collins helped structure a course in popular and traditional music and taught for many years. He inspired his former student Eric Sunudo to become a music lecturer at the department.
And what fascinated me about him was, like you're saying, that here is a foreigner, a white man, teaching us our music, whilst our people were teaching his kind of music. So I found that to be quite interesting, intriguing, and that is what drew me more closer to him. Over the years, he has become my mentor, my father, my everything. At a point in time, we were sharing an office, and I had that close proximity.
Now, John Collins spends most of his time in Ghana's capital, Accra, living in the house where his late father's ashes are buried. Collins married a Ghanaian and has a son and a grandchild. He feels that it is the Ghanaian people who made his stay in Africa memorable.
All I've been talking about is not about the climate, not about the food, the sunshine. Everything that's positive is ultimately people. It's people who create the world. The world could be an empty place or full of nature, but it's the human beings that make the place into heaven or hell. I'm blessed to have come here, stayed here, loved the country, and been accepted by the country and become a Ghanaian citizen.
Thanks to Collins' work in projecting popular and traditional Ghanaian music, there is now a huge interest in it among young Ghanaian musicians, like these ones who gather here at the University of Ghana every month to keep the January alive. Isaac Kalaji, VOA News, Accra.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching. Good night.